Welcome back to the Expat Community, where you're joined by myself, your host, Noor, and today's expat member joining us for today's episode is...
Steve Cox.
So thank you very much for joining us, Steve. I'm excited to have you here as a teacher because you are quite the expert, being a pedagogical practitioner. So it is very interesting to have you on to hear your point of views and see how the world of teaching is actually shaped up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very honoured. Thank you.
So just to begin with, obviously you've been in teaching for a very long time. I would like to know what made you want to come across teaching in the first place?
Okay, yeah, so I've been a teacher for about 20 plus years now. I think it was while I was at sixth form. It was thinking about what is it that I wanted to study at university. I was very much into sport. I played a lot of different sports and looked at PE teacher. So basically applied to various universities for PE courses. The time that I was applying, it was a B.Ed course that you did, 4-year teacher training course to become a PE teacher. And I just thought, what would I like to be doing for 4 years at university? And playing sports seemed to be a good option for me.
All right, and mix that in with education?
Yeah, in education as well. I mean, I was in the Air Cadets at the time. That gave me a lot of opportunity for instruction, developing people, etc. I think cadets is good because it gives young people that opportunity at quite a young age. And I think from there, I sort of combined that interest in instructing, which, became teaching, and also my interest in sport as well.
Oh, that's lovely. Could you just tell me a bit more about your cadet lifestyle? Because most commonly people will just think, oh, you're just joining the army, basically. For not many people that know about it, what did you actually do in the cadets that made you decide?
Cadets is a youth organisation. It's not a pipeline to the military. It's designed for young people who have an interest in different services. So, for example, I joined the Air Cadets. You could join the Navy Cadets, which is Sea Cadets. You could join the Army Cadets. For me, I was interested in aviation. I was interested in the RAF. But many people from the Air Cadets don't actually go into the military as such. So youth organisation, basically, St John's Ambulance would be something similar. Scouts would probably be the most similar type of organisation. But you're talking 13 to 18-year-olds. Yeah.
All right, so it's keeping you busy in your youth days. You're learning extra skills, character building, essentially.
Yeah, it's extra. It has lots of things. It does things like first aid, etc. We had to learn about various military topics. We had to learn about the RAF structure. We had to learn some physics, etc. We needed to know about airframes, how planes, take off, the lift. So there was quite a lot that went with it, yeah.
All right, that's cool. It's good to get an insight on the cadets and how it shaped you up in your journey as a teacher. What did you learn in your 20 plus years of teaching?
I think some of the things, and maybe I'll just go through my sort of experience from when I first started and some of the changes that I saw. So I qualified as a teacher back in 1994. We had the old style overhead projectors that had the bulbs and the screens and things like that, and the bulbs kept blowing, I remember.
Interesting. I think I was a student, so I know from the student perspective.
I wonder if there are any people that remember that from their school days, yeah. And we were taught how to use overlays and acetates and things like that. So that was sort of where technology was when I started. The other thing we did is we would have the TV would be on the trolley and the video, and we'd wheel it into class to show videos, and we'd have to remember where on the tape the bit was that we wanted to watch. So, that was the level of technology that we started with. I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen is the introduction of the interactive whiteboard. I think that's changed the dynamics of classrooms quite a bit, because obviously that then becomes the focal point as well. Seeing PowerPoint presentation, the use of PowerPoint, skill that teachers have needed, really. I think one of the other things I've noticed from my experience as well, maybe the last 10 or 15 years, I'm not quite sure the starting point, but the cognitive science aspect that's come into teaching and the way that that's affected teaching, and that's something that I very much got interested in when that first started. I think for me, my sort of style of teaching changed in a sense that it began very much with group work, with being the guide on the side and those sort of aspects. Whereas I was finding some of those activities the students were struggling with. I questioned or found it difficult with the amount of learning possibly that they were doing. They were active, but were they learning really? And so for me personally, my thoughts, philosophy, whatever you wish to call it, sort of changed and starting to embrace the cognitive science. So retrieval practice starters, the check for understanding questions and stuff.
So would you say this cognitive science started coming in not as of very recent, but was it shortly after you got into teaching? Or?
Yeah, I'd say probably last 10 years. I mean, I think various people joined at various stages, if you see what I mean. And I know where I sort of came in on that. Research ed was a very big part for me, and I would attend research ed events and got into reading books that were these based. So yeah, that's for me where it sort of started, but I'd roughly say 15 years.
Okay, no, that's interesting because I got my QTS in 2022. So when I got into teaching, that's something they already taught us at the time. So I never thought anything of it that this might be new, this might be old. It's just something we learnt. Now, talking about the cognitive science, one thing that really got me interested personally was the metacognition side of teaching children. And basically what I learned was metacognitive abilities is where you get them to question their own answers. Now, I feel like in my teaching strategies, I actually use that quite a lot now. Even if the student gets it wrong, I want to actually figure out where they got that answer from in the first place. So by asking them questions, where did you get the answer from? How did you figure that part out? Even if it's wrong, they then realize, actually, you know what? Where did I get the answer from? Maybe I need to think about it again. So that's one skill I do like to use a lot. And I did learn it in my teacher training, metacognitive abilities, get them to question their own selves.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
So yeah, I do enjoy that. That's lovely. Okay, so I do want to quickly delve on the point of evidence-based teaching, because just like I said, in 2022, when I was doing my teacher training, this was the heavy focus on, okay, you got this structure, you have this structure, this is backed up by evidence. I would like to know your opinion on one of the biggest, I say biggest, I'm just saying it for context, it's a big company, the EEF, Education Endowment Foundation. Now, that was one of the companies that got shown to us, saying, this is backed up by research, you're more than welcome to use it in your teaching. What do you think about companies that do research on how teachers should possibly go about their teaching days?
My experience of the EEF, they're not necessarily a company that are trying to package a good and to sell that goods to somebody, a product, whatever. When I did my MPQ ML, and this is back in 2019, so there was only one middle leader qualification for MPQs. So when I did that, that's when we were introduced to EEF, and specifically the implementation model. And that's now become the gold standard for any school improvement, really, is to use that model. They then came out with a toolkit, which is quite famous. But what it was able to do is it looked at different areas. Metacognition was one of them. And it would say how many months, that this technique could add. So you'll see things like +2, +3, that's the number of months. So people very much used that toolkit, and that became quite a big influence, really, on teaching. It went through techniques also that weren't quite so good. It also looked at the cost, as in how much money or how much time, and it also looked at the evidence as well. So it was very grounded, and I think that toolkit is where what you've experienced in your teacher training, a lot of that is where that is based, yeah.
Now, I also have another side of the argument that I personally think, like, it's great to use EEF, but I do sometimes think, is it, like you said, is it gold standard? Like, for example, they give you behavior classroom management techniques, but I think that's more of a personal teaching relationship that you'll have with your class. Not every student's going to be the same. If you give one student a warning, another student might not follow the same way. They might be misbehaving longer. So where do you find the middle ground? Okay, I read up what EEF said. It doesn't work for me. Where would you go from there?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. From my experience, EEF looks more at teaching technique rather than classroom behaviour management. I think there is an interesting discussion that goes on between relationship and relationship building and what others might term as rules or rules-based. There are schools that have very clear behaviour consequences that become more significant. I'm just trying to think of, an example would be C1, C2, C3. C1 is a warning, C2 is a final warning, C3 is a detention. So every school pretty much has a progressive system that the sanction becomes greater. I think that's useful for a teacher that's starting. I think when a teacher is starting with a new class and the class wishes to challenge that teacher to begin with, I think if we say to that teacher, just build relationships, that's not fair on that teacher. They need something that is stronger. I always say that behaviour system needs to be stronger than one individual. It's the behaviour system that needs to do the heavy lifting. Now, the behaviour system is to help you to get that to that point of relationship. It's very common for kids to say to teachers, "Sir, do you remember when we used to play you up?" And that's such a common thing, and that's because the teacher has had to go through a difficult situation to get the best. And, Trucker's sort of thing about groups, the forming, storming, norming, performing, in a sense, that's what happens in every classroom as well. It's formed, as in you start a new school in September and you've been given a class. That's forming. The storming bit is going to be the challenge. The students are going to challenge you. They want to know if you're consistent, want to know where your boundaries are, want to know what they can get away with, what they can't. Then you become norming. So in the sense that the class is starting to know exactly what goes, what doesn't go. The atmosphere, is much better. And then obviously the class is really able to inform. So I think classroom management, I think there are some skills. Teach Like a Champion was a book that had a significant effect on my behaviour management. It showed me little techniques that worked. It made me realise things that I was actually causing the problems myself by some of the ways that I was reacting. So that was significant for classroom management. But I think it's a little bit lazy, and we need to be a little bit careful where we blame teachers for behaviour in lessons and we say you've not built a relationship with them. I think both is needed. Relationships can often be the goal rather than the method.
Now, I've had the pleasure to work alongside you for a good year, and then obviously we went our own ways. But in that 1 year, I remember the first time we all met each other, the whole departments, everyone getting to know each other. You mentioned a technique that you personally use, but I feel like we can all apply this method as well. Now, if you wouldn't like me to mention your daughter's name, that's fine. I can blur it out.
Oh, no, that's fine.
But that's fine, yeah. Essentially, to shorten it down, I call it the Katie method. But I'll never forget this because it's something you first mentioned when we all first met you. Could you just explain that a bit further?
Yeah. It's called the Katie test. I have a daughter. Her name is Katie. This is something I got off another school, so it's not my thing. But basically, is what I'm providing, would it be good enough for my daughter? If my daughter was sat at the back of my lesson, would I be happy with that? And that just becomes a standard. I think it's important. Sometimes we can think of schools as in, I teach at this school, but I wouldn't necessarily send my daughter here. Whereas actually it's about, is this good enough for us? It was interesting, the school that I referred to, basically the head teacher had mentioned this daughter's name. She actually started at the school. And she said she felt like Harry Potter because everybody knew her name. So, yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah. Okay. But, yeah, it makes it more personal to you. You want the best for every kid in that sense, because if it's good enough for your daughter, it must be good for everyone that you teach. So that's a lovely way of looking at it. Like I say, I don't have any children right now, but I can definitely apply it in elsewhere. Would it be good for my cousins? If my cousins were here, would I teach? So it is a very nice way to look at things. Now, there is one framework that I believe is being taught to every teacher as soon as you get into teaching. As far as I know, it's called the Bloom's Taxonomy, which you will be strongly aware of, as well as myself and other teachers. Now, when I did do a bit of research on it, I did not actually realise we're talking over 70 years this framework has actually been into play. I just thought, okay, I learned in my teacher training. Fair enough, I'll use it. But 70 years into play, I would say that's a long time. Now, it is an effective framework. It's split into 6 different cognitive parts. I've got it noted down here, which is remembering, understanding, applying, analysing, evaluating, and creating. Now, these 6 cognitive concepts have been played for 70 years. Am I wrong in saying it's outdated, or 70 years is a long time? What happened to other evidences to bring up a new framework? Is there a new framework to look forward to, or why reinvent the wheel?
I think it's interesting. When it first came in, obviously it was revolutionary at the time. It was not thought of before. I think at the same time, Gardner's multiple intelligences came out as well. So that was another piece of the work, and thinking hats came as well. So there was a lot of this sort of ideas. As far as Bloom's taxonomy, I think the issue, or what happened at the time, everybody tried to jump to the very top. It's often drawn as a pyramid. So it was about those high order thinking skills, as it's sort of described. For me, what I think people miss is the bottom layer, which is knowledge. And if we look at the pyramid, one thing we'll notice is the largest section. It's also what everything else is built on. So there has been in recent times a interest. Some schools will describe themselves as knowledge-rich or knowledge-rich curriculums. I think it's important that you can't understand something unless you know a lot about it. I use the phrase, you can't apply what you don't know. So there is a base knowledge. If you read a newspaper and you read an article on a particular event or situation, you're actually using a lot of your own background knowledge to understand that, and newspapers rely on that as well. So I would say the knowledge is really important, and I would say being careful that we don't just go to create and synthesize and all the rest of it, whereas students don't actually know what they're creating or synthesizing, really. So that's my sort of, if you want to call it, issue with Bloom's taxonomy. The other thing with Bloom's taxonomy as well, I have done GCSE geography and teach geography. So I gave up the shorts and put on a suit instead. So I switched to teaching geography full time. And one of the things with, especially in the humanities subjects, is the questions in the paper actually follow Bloom's taxonomy. So we have, and command words, I'm sure people are aware of command words. So we have words like define, state, name. So these are obviously the bottom, but then especially at GCSE, we might get a 7-mark question at the end, and that will use command words such as discuss, assess. So I feel like the GCSE exam questions often follow Bloom's taxonomy, and from that perspective, I quite like it, yeah. And I like the way that they have done that and the way that they've done it, yeah.
I've always been using Bloom's taxonomy because that's what we learned when I was in my teacher training. It did come as a bit of a shock when I realised it's a 70-year-old framework, which, to be fair, it has been, they do add to it.
Yeah, there's been a revised version of it. So that came out. So there was an original version and there is now a revised version.
Yeah, and just to go back on it, last time I read up on it, that was where the high order thinking skills came into play in the revised version. So it's interesting.
That was the first time we started talking about high order thinking skills. And I think also it was part of some curriculums wanted to change to be skills based as well. And it was about interdisciplinary skills. Now, what I've found is things like evaluate in a science exam can be very different to evaluate in a history exam. So I think that's what came out of it as well. And where there was criticism, it was that these words can actually mean different things between subjects. Right. So are they really interdisciplinary or are they specific to a subject? Yeah.
Coming from the teacher's perspective, that's a framework for us teachers. Now, it actually dawned on me, possibly, I think it was last year. So in ICT, I'm teaching my year 7s currently. There's a whole topic called computational thinking. But I'll just summarize it for you really quickly. Or are you aware of computational thinking?
No, if you could. No.
So it's a 4-part problem-solving technique called computational thinking. So it involves decomposition the first part, where you break a problem down into small pieces. Then you could move on to pattern recognition, where you look for similarities in a question or whatever that you're doing. And then you would have abstraction, where you focus on only the important parts, because if you look at an exam question, half of it is nonsense. You just need to know the important parts. And then the last one would be an algorithm, where you actually create the step-by-step solution. And not one of them, you can't have one without the other, basically, or else it's ineffective in a sense. So when I'm teaching my year sevens this skill of computational thinking, I did realize it's actually a skill that it's not just ICT based. You can take the idea of decomposition and apply it in different subjects. Why does it have to just be ICT? So then 4-part steps as of last year, I actually started telling all my students now, even though I'm teaching you it in ICT lesson, even though it's called computational thinking, you can apply that to your end of term exams for every subject possible. How? Decomposition. Break the question down into smaller parts so you understand it. Have you answered a question like this before for pattern recognition? Is it discuss? Is it evaluate? What do you notice? And abstraction. Like I said, the questions usually have nonsense built into it, so focus only on the important parts. And then your algorithm would be your answer, step by step. So I found that to be a framework that could be definitely applied to children, that they can then use in any subject possible. So I'm currently still teaching every year 7 that I'm teaching right now and will do next year. Computational thinking is a good method for them to think about.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. And I think what you've drawn out there is 2 things. We're either teaching knowledge or we're teaching skill. So at the end of the lesson, it's either what do they now know or what can they now do. Skill is very sequential. A book that I read, Josh Kaufman, he did a book called The First 20 Hours. There's also a very good TED talk that he's done. It's quite funny as well. But he does the first thing. Basically what he's saying, if it's 10,000 hours, but that's to become like world-class athlete, he's saying, how long would it take to get, say, 80% good at something? And he calculated it as 20 hours. So he then decided, what do you need to do? And the first part is deconstruction. So deconstruct the skills, which sounds very similar.
Yeah, decomposition, deconstruction.
I think also, and going back to exams, what I found as well is there's actually a skill to answering some of the questions that are in the paper. So, for example, when I'm teaching, say, GCSE geography, I'm not just teaching them the content, but I'm also teaching them skill of how was the question constructed and what is it that the examiner is actually after. Because sometimes if they don't answer the question in a way that it has been constructed, then it's not a fair reflection. Their grade ends up not reflecting the amount of work and the knowledge that they have. So I think skill is a very important part. It comes in a lot of things. The other thing I'd say on that as well is we often get the comment, where am I going to apply this in real life? Why do I need to know various things, so Pythagoras or things like that. And as you're saying, some of it is actually learning skills of how we go about breaking down problems and how we end up solving them. So again, transferable skills, etc. I think those are really important. Yeah,
and I think it's part of the job anyways. When people think teaching, some people that aren't teachers just think you stood up there, you're just saying what you know, but it's a lot deeper than that. There is a lot to it. So just to end off this topic, other than technology that you mentioned earlier on, obviously you went from, what was it, trolley TVs being bought in, to interactive whiteboards. What other things do you think has changed in education over time? And I do believe it won't ever stop changing. We need to adapt to the world. So what changes have you noticed?
I think there's a difference. One is what the core values are, the core mission is, and then is the method. So the core mission always stays the same in a sense of educating children, giving them life opportunities. The method, very much has changed. So interactive whiteboard is the thing that I mentioned. Data was very significant. We had flight paths. We had like boards where we would put kids in certain places. There'd be 2 variables, how they're getting on. Are they above? Are they below? Rebecca Allen wrote a book about the next big thing in school improvement. And I think eventually Ofsted said, we don't want to look at your internal data. And I think that then drew some of the flaws that happen when we are doing that. And the fundamental, and with all these changes, the fundamental is always the same, is, and I call this high quality teaching by high quality teachers. That's the mission. That's what leaders should be enabling, really.
So like I said earlier as well, I don't believe that it's ever going to stop changing, because we need to adapt to the world. We've got interactive whiteboards now. With the power of AI, we'll probably have holograms. You never know. So it's interesting to see how even education gets affected over time. So we'll see what happens next. So after you researching a lot and obviously applying what you know, hence why you're a pedagogical practitioner, what would you say about new staff members coming in, providing CPD for them? Is it essential, or is it, would you say, optional? How would you come across seeing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a few thoughts on that. One of the things that I would split the school or any organisation into inputs, processes and outputs. And often as schools, we obsess about the outputs, the results, whereas actually the only thing that we have control over is the processes. And one of the processes of that is the training of staff. So the input, we might not necessarily have been involved in the recruitment of staff, etc., but we have a responsibility for developing staff. Now, professional development is the thing that I absolutely love. If I could do that every day for the whole day, that's amazing. For me, it's about equipping teachers to be able to teach better, but more importantly, giving them something that they can use in the classroom. The definition of high quality CPD is that something changes in the classroom. If it doesn't change in the classroom, then basically we've sat through a really nice TED talk by someone and we love the cognitive science and we get all that. But guess what happens tomorrow? I've got year 11 mock exams to turn around in 2 days. Yeah. Whereas if it is a technique that can be used, so for me it's very practical. I also believe in rehearsal. So I get people to practice their technique, if that's cold call, etc., whatever it is. So it's low stakes practice, and then that gives them confidence to use it. But I think it's equipping people with skills and knowledge, predominantly skills and practical things that they can do. And that's where I think CPG should be focused, yeah.
I do remember that, as I mentioned before, I worked with you. There is one CPD that you hosted in school for us all. And I applied it, I kid you not, Steve, I applied it the very next day, and the effectiveness of it was crazy. So tell me, what's this?
This is hands up.
Hands up method, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people don't like it. Some people think it's primary. The problem I have is one of the things you need is to gain the attention of students. I have a little teaching model which is APT, attention, participation, thinking. So the first thing you need is the attention of students. Often you're trying to transition from noise to silence. Could be that you've given them group work to do. The default that teachers do is they try and talk above the noise, which means they're making it even more noisier. So for me, the hands up, one is silent, and also it's a sign of compliance. People might not like that word, but I can see whether they've heard the instruction. So if a student puts their hand up and carry on talking, that means, yeah, I've heard it, but I'm not doing it. So yeah, and again, for me, like Teach Like a Champion, etc., I worked at a school called Q3 Langley in the UK, and it was just looking for efficient ways of maximising teacher time. And, it's not meant as anything to do with control, whatever, but it's about having techniques which increase teacher time. So yeah, that's hands up.
For me as well, the way I've noticed it helped me was personally, just like you said earlier, attention. So I can actually start seeing around my class which students have given me their attention. And like I said, behaviour-wise as well, if they've noticed me but carry on talking, then that's a different issue as well. So it has really helped me control my class a lot better just by that one small method. One more thing I've noticed as well is it has a domino effect though. So if one person puts a hand up, everyone's looking like, oh, now it's time for me to put my hand up. Oh, says now want my attention. So the domino effect also helps.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Also with it, I use another technique, and this is from Teach Like a Champion, and it's called least invasive correction, whereas I will initially narrate the positive, which is to say, thank you, I've got John's hands up, Sarah's hands up. So what I'm doing is I'm not correcting people. I'm not saying, Steve, why is your hand not up? I'm actually narrating what I want to see, and that's a positive one. I then would use anonymous correction, waiting for 3 people. But as you say, when the student sees somebody else doing it, then that has a effect. So that's like a multiplier effect of your technique, yeah.
Now, throughout this conversation, Steve, you've mentioned Teach Like a Champion quite a few times in the book. Would you say that's a holy grail for new teachers, or how would you see that? Because you've mentioned it a few times.
Yeah, I've mentioned it a few times. It had a huge significance on me. To be honest, I was trying techniques that I knew weren't working, that I was expected to, and I was frustrated. I worked at an ARC school, so I was part of the staff that ARC, let me just remember the name, ARC Bolton, which is in Birmingham in the UK, and they very much embraced Teach Like a Champion techniques. So our school was based on all of that. That was my first exposure, and I just found that they were just little things that worked. And the book is based on Doug Lemov, and what he did is he looked for schools where teachers were working in difficult schools, yet were getting outstanding results. Outliers, basically. And he said, right, I'm going to go to those classrooms, I'm going to see what they do. So all he did is he sat at the back, he videoed it, he noted what they did, he gave them names, cold call, no opt-out. So he just gave something that we can refer to and significant. Again, they were practical things that I could do, and they worked. So for me, the book is really helpful. Some people see it as controversial. In some of the methods, it can be thought of as compliance by children, and I know I've mentioned that again. But for me, it gave very practical techniques. So even the ones that you mentioned that I've used in CPD, they've most probably come from that. And for me, it had the biggest significant effect on my teaching. And to be honest, I wish I'd come across it earlier.
I'm yet to read it, but since you've mentioned it quite a few times, it's put in my mind now. I will give it a read. Definitely looking forward to that. And to go back on one point that you mentioned right at the beginning, so you were part of the cadets. So would you essentially say that gave you some life skills to prepare you for teaching at a young age? Or because people that don't know you, I do personally know you, you are a very structured guy. You follow your step-by-step routines, etc. And I don't know if you remember, I did ask you when I first met you, are you part of the military? And you're like, what gave it away? I still remember that. It's just the way you are, your structures, how on point you are. Do you think that sort of helped your teaching?
I think it very much has affected the way that I approach things. I also spent 4.5 years in the army as well as doing cadets. I think cadets instilled in me some discipline, some expectation, some of the aspects that you notice for the military. I think part of it is personality as well. So maybe my personality, not just because of a military background, but liking structure, liking order, being very focused on systems. Some of that is just personality driven, but also having experiences where that is very key for the environment. So for me, the military worked really well because it fitted with the way that I approach things as well. And, sometimes people have been in the forces, still have certain quirks and ways of doing stuff. And often that can be something that people spot. So, that's right.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for your service as well. But if it helped you in your teaching, great. Why not then? Definitely. So just to end this conversation off, Steve, if you could give advice to new teachers, potentially adding in a point on when is the right time to progress as well, what would it be?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think first, become competent on whatever level you are at. I know people are keen for promotion. If you're a teacher, you want to be a head of department, head of year. From there, you want to go to assistant head, etc. I would say become very competent at what your level is. I would suggest do the MPQH, which is the next level up. So, for example, when I was a head of department, I did the MPQSL. As a deputy head now, I'm completing the MPQH. So get that qualification. Those qualifications are good. They've been written specifically for those posts, and they've also been written as a sort of reaction consequence of making sure people in these positions have the skills that they need. And then look for opportunities, really. People promote competent people. So, if you can be competent, sometimes you might want to ask the opportunity to take something on, an aspect. Obviously, if you're going for middle leadership, you want to be looking at, is there a whole school responsibility, say homework, etc., just one area that you could experience. And then from there, and it's, sometimes you get the break early on, sometimes you have to wait for it. We apply for jobs, we're up against other candidates, sometimes internal promotions, sometimes we're looking elsewhere. But be good at what you're currently doing, enjoy what you're doing, rather than being too focused on what the next step up is for you.
Lovely. That's some solid advice, and I appreciate that, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm a new teacher, but I can always use
Yeah,
advice and what to do next. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Really
very much.
enjoyed it.
And as well, for people that are watching, if you do want to follow along with Steve, what he does next, etc., you're very active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, very
so
much.
I will post your LinkedIn. So
Thank
if
you.
anyone wants to follow along, they can always find you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, that's super.
Yeah. Thank you again for your time, Steve. It's been great.
Thank you very much.